All right, we are in. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well. Nice to meet you, Ryan.
Nice to meet you too. I'm so glad we were able to connect after I randomly emailed you.
See, I respond to random emails. I guess I don't want people to know that.
No, I guess not, but it worked out this time, and obviously, with all the chaos in the last couple of weeks, I was looking for people with your firefighter experience and all this, to kind of weigh in. I mean, just off the top, I mean, was anyone that did they lose their homes or anything like that in the Palisades or Altadena fire?
Yes, I had a couple of not close friends, but acquaintances who lost their homes in Palisades
Mm,
and in the Eaton fire. So, and some firefighters have lost their homes while they were on duty and while they were fighting and trying to save other people's homes.
yeah.
Um, when it's a community wide disaster like that, that's just going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It seems like no one in LA hasn't been touched by this in some way, shape, or form.
very true,
Yeah.
very true.
Well, we're gonna get into the whole fire thing and your career as a fire captain and everything like that in a little bit. But I'd love to just kind of get to know who you are and what's going on. So like where are you from originally?
Okay. Well, we are sitting right now in West Hollywood, where your studio is. I was born 5 miles from here,
Oh
just
wow.
down the road in Hollywood. So I am a native.
Wow.
Now, my parents weren't. They both came from other parts of the country, but they met here and stayed. So I got to be a Angelino.
You are the second person in as many podcasts who is a native Angelino. And I tell you, I've done like more than 120 of these, and I've probably only had 5 or 6 people who are actually born in LA and stayed. So this is your town.
This is my town. Yeah, I point out that, the reason why so many people come here and stay probably is the Rose Parade. It's New Year's Day,
Yeah,
it's sunny, people are walking around in shirt sleeves, and if you're from Minot, North Dakota, and looking at that going, "What am I doing here?"
exactly. I've only been here for about a year, so I arrived at the like kind of like towards the end of November last year. Because I was born in Canada, but I've lived abroad for like 25 years. I was in China for a bit, and then I was in Dubai, mostly during COVID, and then just came here recently. So I've been trying to like navigate learning how to live in LA, and then also dealing with these incredible natural disasters and arson and everything else that just keeps happening around here and just around the United States in general. I mean, I have friends in North Carolina that's like their homes got wiped out from the flooding last year.
Oh my, yes.
Yeah, it's been a crazy 12 months, and it throwing an election in there.
It has been, it has been. Oh
Yeah,
my goodness, yes.
yeah.
Um
So what were your early days like living here in Los Angeles? I mean, what'd you get into while you were in school?
Oh, um, I grew up, in a community little north of downtown called, in the San Fernando Valley. San Fernando Valley is a pretty large chunk of Los Angeles, but there's a mountain range between the 2 sections.
Mhm.
Um, I had a pretty normal growing up period. I had a dog, I had a bicycle, I had a baseball mitt, um, and
Classic American.
just classic. And I'd be out riding my bike, and my parents would say, "Be home by the time the street lights come on."
Yeah.
And it felt like it was a pretty safe, environment to grow up in. So I had lots of friends, lots of friends.
Do you play any sports or anything like that?
I did a little bit of baseball,
Mhm.
nothing more than that. A little bit of track and field, in high school.
Mm.
Um, but I also you had seen that I'm also, an author and I write things.
Mhm.
Um, but which was, a major part of my career as a firefighter and a fire captain also, because I wrote training manuals. But before that, when I was growing up in the San Fernando Valley, um, I my friend down the street, his father was in, Cold War aerospace, and
Oh,
he
really?
yeah, and he was the only one that we knew of who had a mimeograph machine. Do you remember what a mimeograph machine is?
I don't remember. You're gonna have to remind me.
Oh, before IBM invented the photocopier technology, if you wanted to make copies, you did it one of two ways. I mean, you put something um, that had several layers on it in a typewriter and made 3 or 4 copies, or you cut a stencil and ran it through a mimeograph machine, which was a barrel with ink, and the stencil was basically what you printed off of. And schools and stuff had that, but they weren't owned by private people very much. And my friend had one, or his dad had one, so he talked his dad into letting us use it to put out a neighborhood newspaper.
Oh, wow.
So there we were, 9 and 10 years old, and we were putting out a weekly newspaper called the Garber Star, because it was Garber Street that we grew up on. And so I sort of got that in my blood,
Writing and publishing at an early age.
writing and publishing at an early age.
Yeah. That's very entrepreneurial. That's quite fun. What kind of stuff did you guys write about?
Oh, well, my friend Steve was the editor-in-chief, of course.
Yeah.
And
Because most kids have like a paper route. Like I had a paper route,
you had a paper route.
but you made a newspaper.
Yeah, we made a newspaper, but since there were only the two of us, we had to pretend that we were like 5 or 6 people. So so I had the Safety Sam column and talk about, the right thing to do when walking under a ladder or whatever. And I was also the star reporter, and then we also had we had a continuing fiction section, and I wrote the continuing serial for that.
Mhm.
And Steve was editor-in-chief, as I said, and he was 2 other reporters. We had lots of we looked really
There were at least 8 of you on paper.
exactly. So we had a lot of fun.
I love that. You got to fake it till you make it. You got to make everyone think you're running a bigger show than you really are.
Yeah, somehow we knew that intuitively.
At the age of 10 or 12.
Uh.
That's amazing. So how long did the newspaper go for?
We had it going for almost a year,
Mhm.
almost a year, and it's kind of embarrassing. My mom kept every copy, and I said, "Oh my God, don't let anyone see this." The serial was a science fiction book that I never actually finished, but it was something like Death in the 25th Galaxy or Space is Mighty Thin stuff.
Hmm.
I mean, I was really into the pulps as a kid.
Yeah.
So, so that was just for fun. And
It's amazing. Like you grew up in such a unique like generation. Like we're probably like one generation apart maybe. And you grew up in the midst of like the Cold War and stuff like that. And space was was this frontier, and of course, the moon landing and all that stuff. And then and you were so interested in it as a kid, and you were writing about it and stuff like that too. But then you had to wait like 50 years now, I guess, until like Elon Musk is like, no, we're going to Mars. Like everyone get on board or get out.
and I keep wondering, can I afford a ticket? If so, I would go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It'd be cool to be buried on Mars.
it would.
Yeah.
Would.
That'd be a hell of a journey. They say it's 6 months.
Well, we have video games, so it's okay.
Absolutely. So after your early publishing career, where did you go after that? Like, what did you do in university? Did you study anywhere?
I did. When I was in school, what I was most interested in was like biology, marine biology. I thought about being an oceanographer.
That's epic. That's so much fun, isn't it?
It was so much fun, and I shot myself in the foot because I had learned how to do research. So I researched the job market and found out that unless you were in the 1% of the class, you were going to go work for an oil company.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, if you were in the 1%, you'd go to Woods Hole or get some other prestigious position. But everyone else, went to work for like drilling companies and stuff.
So most of the people that go to school for marine biology end up working for big oil?
Well, the oceanographers did at that time.
Mm.
Yeah, there were other branches of marine biology that I wasn't as fit for.
Mhm.
I liked measuring things, but yeah. So I figured that out, and then I switched to public health.
Oh.
And eventually that led me into being a candidate for a paramedic job for the fire department.
Okay. So public health, like you went to school for 4 years?
I went to school intermittently. I would get interested in something, and I'd go. I crewed for a while on the RV Ventuna, which was a research vessel out of Pepperdine.
Mhm.
And I wandered, kind of like you wandered the world. I kind of wandered for a while. So I never picked up a degree. I'd do a couple of semesters, and then like squirrel,
Yeah.
I'd get interested in something and go off in another direction.
That's such a nice way to that's such a great way to, like, build educational experience, right? Because I feel like if you just study on one thing for 4 years, you really get burnt out. But it's nice to, like, be able to just go off on tangents and try other things and then come back. It's much I think it's much more attuned to our natural instincts, right? Instead of just
Yes.
focusing on one thing for 4 years and then doing that one thing for the rest of your life.
Right. Right.
We're all complex people.
We are.
I always say the only reason I got through my university career was because I was playing basketball. Like I couldn't take any time off and I couldn't travel or anything like that. So then, from the age of 8 to the age of 22, I did nothing but play basketball. So then once I was done playing basketball, that's when I started my real wandering. And I
Mm.
kind of never stopped.
Yep. Well, you had commitments.
Commitments to wander.
Yes. And now you're in LA, and welcome to LA.
Thank you
Um,
very much.
I have a friend who worked at the Canadian consulate for quite a while,
Mm.
and you might be interested in knowing that Los Angeles is Canada's third largest city by population.
Is it really?
Yes, we are.
That's pretty epic. I mean, I know all of California has more people than Canada. I've known that statistic for a long time. There's like 37 or 38 million people in California, and I think there's about 35 million people in all of
In
Canada.
all of Canada.
Yeah. It's insane.
I know. Oh, but it's a beautiful country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I heard the other day too is that Los Angeles has a larger economy than all of Switzerland. Just Los Angeles.
Just Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I can believe it. We have 2 deep water harbors. I mean, that's very key to uh, any community having riches,
Mhm.
coming in and going out. Without those deep water harbors, we probably wouldn't be quite so dynamic.
No, maybe not.
Yeah.
Because the entertainment industry definitely has its ups and downs.
Oh, it does.
So, okay, so you're in public health, and then what made you kind of wanna get into being a paramedic? How did that kinda come to play?
It was interesting. I had some hospital training. I was looking at public health. I had also picked up a side job. I would uh, just back up one step. My dad definitely was from the Depression era, and his belief was that a man should have at least 3 different professions that he's good at, so that if the economy goes bad in your area, you don't have to, like, move to follow your job, you switch to another kind of work.
That would've been really helpful in 2020 for a lot of people too.
It would indeed, it would indeed. So along the way, I became a truck driver. I learned how to drive a big truck, and then I took a job as an apprentice meat cutter.
Mhm.
So I spent 2 years, going through an apprenticeship program and became a journeyman meat cutter.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then a friend called up who was working for the city of LA, personnel department saying, "Hey, have you ever thought of being a paramedic for the fire department?"
That was a cold call?
It was a cold call from a friend. Ki kind of like a certain person that contacted me on LinkedIn. Who would it be?
For a conversation, not for a career path.
Well, I don't know, yeah. Got a company you're starting? No, just kidding.
So that's amazing. So just a random call from a friend was like, "Hey, there's a chance to be a paramedic. What do you think?"
Random call, and I said, "Oh, well, send me the paperwork and I'll look it over." And I filled out an application form. I did not know that that year the fire department was only gonna hire 71 people as a paramedic, and 5,000 of us, applied.
5,000.
5,000. It was only afterwards that I found out that I had that much, competition.
Mhm.
It might have been very daunting if I knew it, but yeah, not knowing is sometimes really helpful.
I talked to another firefighter, the other day, Brian Howard. He was working in Brentwood. He's retired now as well. I've just been trying to reach out to a few people to see what's going on, and he said the same thing. Like, when he, applied to be a firefighter, there was, like, 7,000 people for, like, 100 jobs. I mean, like, I mean, I it's incredible the competition to get into the fire department or the paramedics. Like, I guess they're good jobs, but I just had no idea there was that amount of people that wanted to get in.
It's really helpful if you're the employer, if you're the city, to have that many applicants because you get to pick for exactly what you want
Mhm.
and for the type of, uh, intelligence, the type of physical abilities, the type of willingness and ability to learn quickly, because it is it is a trade level rather than a professional level job in a lot of ways, but that doesn't mean you don't have to think really fast sometimes in the situations.
Oh
So
yeah, shit's happening all the time. I mean, you guys are putting your lives on the line on a by the minute, like by the second. I mean,
y-
the decisions you have to make are split second.
sometimes it is true. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's terrifying. So 5,000 people, 71 job openings or available jobs. So do you just like hand in a resume or did you get a chance to like be interviewed? Did you get to meet
Oh,
someone face to face? Like this was before AI was choosing out who's a good job candidate and who's not?
it was a very in-depth procedure,
Mm,
a process. Yes, first I filled out a whole bunch of paperwork.
mm.
Then they sent me the identical paperwork to fill out again because now this is, the 1980s and you didn't have very many computers. So all the paperwork had to go to another department, and the personnel department, then the fire department, then other places. Once I'd filled out the same paperwork 3 times, I was wondering, do I really want this job?
Mhm.
But
Haven't they heard of a Xerox?
yeah, they were available by then. Um, but yeah, so there was a positive interview. There was a skills testing, where you did both fill out not a questionnaire. You fill out a series of tests, and then you see if you are physically capable of doing things like running up, 4 flights of stairs with 80 pounds on your back, and various things like that. And then there was the negative interview.
Oh, what's the negative interview?
The negative interview was where they would sit you down and ask you, "What are all the reasons that we shouldn't hire you?"
Oh, that's tough.
Oh, it is. I said, well, now he says, well, what about this traffic violation you had? And because they had access to everything, DMV and
Mhm.
and criminal records and things like that. Um, and so there was, and then at the end, the the investigator said very kindly, "So, would you take a lie detector test to tell us that if all of this, what you're saying, is accurate?"
Mhm.
I go, "Okay."
You must have shocked them.
Yeah, they never did lie detector tests
Mm,
on the applicants, but it was an interview question. And what you're looking for is someone who is reliable, who can go into somebody's house and give them life saving care. And if that person has valuables, you ignore those valuables or you protect them for them.
mhm.
You don't want, so if you can weed them out, you don't want someone that is unsafe or has light fingers or something like that, because there might just be you, your partner, and the patient in their home, and you've got to be you've got to be reliable.
That's really I mean, it really is the gold standard of people who just do the right thing in the right moment, isn't it?
And they try to find out going into the process before they give you any training at all
Mhm.
if you're that kind of person, and hopefully they succeed most of the time. Seemed like it.
Well, I mean, I guess from their side, they spend a ton of money on each candidate, right? Because the training you guys get is forever. I mean, like the skills that you learn as a firefighter and as a paramedic, I mean, you have those for life, right?
Yes.
And as long as you keep those skills up, you pretty much have a job for life.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
So you got through, you passed, you were one of the 71.
Yep, I was one of the 71. Um, Went through the academy training, part of which was, I thought, a lot of fun, especially because they sent me to police pursuit school. I was going to be driving an ambulance on the streets, maybe on the wrong side of the street, lights and sirens running, things like that. So they taught me how to drive a police pursuit car,
Uh-huh.
and so I could pursue bandits if I needed to, but that wasn't my job.
No.
So that, in fact, that training is something that I then passed on to some of my fellow firefighters. Down through the years, I became a training officer, and I taught offensive driving.
Mm.
We try not to call it that.
It's not defensive driving, that's
It's
for
not
sure. It's
defensive
got to be
driving.
offensive.
Yeah,
Tactical driving, or how would you call that?
I like that term,
Yeah,
tactical driving.
because it's not defensive because you're not hiding from people, right? Like and you could I guess offensive is the best way to say it, but then that could really turn people off.
Right. And so there's got to be a better term.
Right. No, that's amazing because yeah, I mean, we live in LA, right? There's crazy stuff going on all the time. You see the ambulances, you see the fire, especially the last couple of weeks. Like you see all these people just rushing through, intersections,
Oh,
and
yes.
it's not easy at all. But so I mean, so what was your first job with the department?
Um, There are certain fire stations that are high volume fire stations for various reasons,
Hmm.
and we try to rotate our newest members through those so they get as much experience as possible as quickly as possible.
Hmm.
So I did spend a fair amount of time in Hollywood and East LA, um, and so yeah, Hollywood was my beat for about 8 years.
Oh, really? Just a quick 8 years?
Just a quick 8 years in the various stations up and down throughout Hollywood.
Hmm.
And I do have a kind of funny story about that. I mentioned earlier that I was born about 5 miles from here in Hollywood.
Hmm.
Well, one of my fire stations covered the area where that little hospital was that I'd been born. So I went and visited one day, looked up the address,
Hmm.
and found out that the building had been knocked down sometime in the past, and it was a parking lot now.
Oh, that's kind of sad.
It was kinda sad, but then I turned it into a joke. I started telling people I was born in a parking lot.
Well, that makes it more interesting.
Yeah, and I was having fun with that, and then my mom found out I was telling people I'm she was so mad. She says, "Glenn, you were not born in a parking lot. You were born in a" "Mom, I can take you there now and show it to you. It's a parking lot."
Yeah,
Yeah, but
that's nice.
I got to tease my mom a lot.
So what was 8 years in Hollywood like as a paramedic and fire officer or firefighter? Like what kind of stuff were you dealing with on a nightly basis or a daily basis?
A lot of Hollywood had a lot of drug overdoses and problems with street people at the time. It comes and goes. I think a few years ago there was still a major problem with that. But Hollywood was one of the places that runaways would gravitate to.
Oh, I didn't know
S-
that.
Oh yeah, you they'd hear about, they'd see movies, things like that, and um, nobody seemed to gravitate to the San Fernando Valley for some reason. You know,
Too suburban.
too suburban.
Yeah.
But yeah, Hollywood, we had a big runaway problem. So you've got your 14 to 16-year-olds on the street thinking they're going to make it, big in Hollywood, and we kind of watched out for them and like so very lots of medical calls.
Yeah.
We had some very diverse communities there. Also, there was a very large cohesive Armenian community in Hollywood, and so much so that a good portion of them did not speak English.
Oh, really?
So you had to you had to be able to find someone, sometimes a 5-year-old, who spoke both English and Armenian.
Yeah.
It helped that I had actually in high school studied the Russian language for 3 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I actually could speak some Armenian.
Mhm.
Actually, I was speaking Russian. Armenians are not all that thrilled when you speak Russian to them.
No, that's part of their history they prefer to forget.
They prefer, but we're here in America. I'm doing my best I can.
Yeah.
So
The post like I've traveled all through the post-Soviet states, right? Like I've been all through Azerbaijan, and I haven't been to Armenia, but I've been to Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan. So you can get by with Russian pretty much, through most of those places. But you're right, they always prefer if you can speak their local dialect, their local language, which is a little bit different.
they would like you a little better if you did, but you're trying. Yeah, I mean, you're communicating. You're
Yeah.
trying.
You're in California for damn, yeah, and you're speaking Russian. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm trying.
Yeah. I mean, was Hollywood a lot rougher back then than it is now? Because it's definitely like still the roughest part of this neighborhood. Like West Hollywood versus East Hollywood versus,
Mhm.
it still has like a bit of a roughness to it. But it must have been worse back when you were there.
I believe it has calmed down. It looks like it's much more now. There's a word that some people really are not happy with. It has gotten more gentrified.
Hmm.
People with more money has moved in. The businesses have gone a little higher upscale.
Hmm.
Things like that. Which has been good for the community overall.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think of it as a much safer place now than it was 30, 40 years ago.
It seems like a lot of a lot of those people doing bad things kind of gravitated towards downtown LA. That seems to be like the place where things are a little bit sketchier.
There can be that. Yep.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we're a kinder, gentler society in a lot of ways than we were, in the 70s and 80s. The Cold War um, was really hard on people's psyches. I know that today we have our own issues, and various communities, are still struggling for all the recognition that they deserve. Um, but we were just coming out of some Wild West periods. The 50s and 60s in LA were pretty rough
Hmm.
in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So where did you go? I mean, you did 8 years in Hollywood at various stations. Where'd you go after that?
Oh, then I actually went down to the harbor and worked in Wilmington and places like that. I I found that I liked the inner city better. For some reason, I was awfully nervous around those oil refineries. It's just, they don't give us problems very often, but when they do, it's something to really kind of worry about. But yeah, and then I floated all over the city, and eventually I wound up um, uh, bidding for a spot as a disaster preparedness instructor for the fire
Oh,
department.
that's interesting.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I can give you a real quick history on that.
Oh, please do, please.
Yeah,
Because we're gonna end up there anyways. Like,
you're gonna, yeah. So the um, uh, the fire department had been looking around, was always looking around at our fellow cities in this hemisphere, and wondering anything that happens to a major city somewhere else, we looked at to see, could that sort of problem happen here? Well, in 1985, a major earthquake hit Mexico City.
oh, I remember this.
And Mexico City was on an alluvial plain. They had the same kind of soil issues. They had the same kind of construction in general, high-rise buildings, things like that. And there was a terrible death toll. A lot of buildings fell down, and essential services had trouble getting in to the people that needed them. Um, and and LA City noticed that. And then in 1987, there was, I think it's 87, there was an earthquake here in LA called Whittier Narrows
Mhm.
that shook City Hall, and City Hall swayed like this for several minutes.
Mhm.
That got the mayor's attention.
Mhm.
Eh,
As it would.
as it would,
Yeah.
as it would. And the same year there was a terrible earthquake in Tokyo. And at the end of that, somebody said, "Well, if we can't get to the citizen, what can we tell them, or what can we teach them ahead of time so that they can self-rescue, so they can support each other until essential services can get into them?"
Mhm.
And so the community emergency response team concept was developed here in LA.
Mhm.
Um, and we started teaching that to people, how to assess a building. Is it going to fall down? How to do a search and rescue in a damaged building. First aid considerations. Supplies that you want to stock, things like that. And that got codified into a 6-week training, and we wrote a manual for that. And I got pulled in just in time to help write the first edition of the manual that went nationwide. It was sent to FEMA, and FEMA distributed it nationwide.
And you were part of the team that put
And
it together.
I was part of the team that put it together.
Oh.
I didn't have the original idea for the program,
Mhm.
but they just happened to pull me in to teach at the time when, they didn't know that I'd been a writer since age 7. So, and then they said, "What can you do with this?" I said, "Oh, I can do a lot with this."
I had my own newspaper, damn it.
Exactly.
That's it's crazy, because the funny thing, like I've always like I lived in China for many years, and China is a huge country with a lot of different climatic zones and a lot of different kind of vegetation, geographic zones. And when a natural disaster hits there, it can be really bad because the central government doesn't know how to deal with all these like local disasters in these local like in these local provinces, and dealing with the local environmental impacts and the local weather and all that kind of stuff. So you really need to have like people who are on the ground who actually know what they're doing. And I find like the same with the United States. Like the United States is so big geographically, and there's so much variety and in the geographical regions and in the weather patterns and stuff like that, that you get like, if there's a natural disaster anywhere in the world, it's probably also going to happen here in the United States. So you just have to be ready for everything all the time, and that's got to be exhausting.
That's why you study ahead and you make plans, and
Mm,
no plan ever works perfectly. But if you haven't thought it through when a disaster happens, or when an event occurs, and you're trying to make it up as you go along, it's not likely to work as well as if you've thought it out, put some resources into it, and you're ready to do something.
mhm. So I mean, would you guys be teaching this manual, like the 6-week course? Would you be teaching it to firefighters and police, or were you going out to like the local public? Were you going to like high schools or grade schools, or were you just volunteers, like of the like people who are leaders in the community or whatever? Like who was the target audience?
The target audience was the public. People who were city employees had a separate program that we would teach. Police officers, we tried to teach. Eventually, got every police officer up to EMT status in the state of California. So any police officer anywhere theoretically can deliver a baby. Um, but this
Like in the parking lot.
like in exactly. But
Sorry, that's gonna stick with me for a while. I was born in a parking lot.
you use that at your next event.
Yeah. Conceived in a parking lot, maybe, but not born in a parking lot.
In the back of a Greyhound bus, going down route, whatever that song goes. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Uh, but no, it was specifically aimed at civic groups and individuals who, people would band together in a neighborhood. One or two blocks would talk to each other, and if you could get 15 or 20 adults in that little area that would agree to take the classes together,
Mhm,
and then be there to help each other out. Um, Simple things like learning where the gas shutoff is in your home
mhm.
so that you can turn the gas off after an earthquake, um, is good information for everybody to have.
Yeah, I would agree. Or when there's fires ripping through your neighborhood. Yeah.
Oh yeah, one piece of information that I tell everybody, that came out of the training, but it's really true. It says, if you own a car in LA, never let the gas tank get less than a quarter.
Mhm. And just in case you gotta get out.
For most vehicles, a quarter tank of gas will take you as far as 100 miles away from the event. And by the time you've traveled 100 miles, you've probably gotten out of the disaster zone, and where there are resources and things like that. So yeah, so please have your car at least have a quarter tank in it all the time.
Yeah.
Just
I had a go bag ready, a couple weeks ago when the fires broke out in Runyon Canyon, because that was pretty close to this neighborhood, right? And they were talking about it spreading through the Hollywood Hills, through West Hollywood and stuff like that, and that was as close as things got to where we are here. But obviously the Pacific Palisades and Pasadena and stuff like that are kind of on polar opposites of where we are here. We're kind of right in the middle of it. But that Runyon Canyon fire was ripping, that one Wednesday night. I think it was the 7th or 8th of January, and yeah, I definitely had to remember how much gas I had in the tank. Yeah.
you'll never let it get low again.
I know, I think, yeah. I just wish there were nicer ways to remind us all. So, I mean, did you enjoy kind of moving into this kind of teaching, writing and kind of manual preparation and programming these disaster responses or emergency responses? Did you like doing that instead of like being out in the field, like helping people, or was it, were you a little 50-50?
I missed the field a little bit, but I'd been 17 years in the field at that point already. I'd delivered 16 babies. I'd gone to numerous traffic accidents and heart attacks and all kinds of things. And so I felt that there was something else that I could do, that would have an effect. So
Mhm.
I liked to joke that I didn't miss being in the fire station, um, or rather, I did miss being in the field and in the fire station until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I realized, hey, I'm going home in a couple of hours and I'm going to sleep all night long in my own bed. And for 17 years, I had not slept through an entire night once. I always went to the busiest fire stations and because I may be a little bit of a adrenaline junkie.
Yeah.
And I
It
probably not.
it
No.
happens. It's interesting. So I actually just learned this too, that firefighters in LA County or where we are now, they work 24 hours on, 24 hours off, 24 hours on. So over a 30-day period, you're working 15 full 24-hour shifts, which is insane. If you have a wife and kids, like half of the time you're supposed to be with them, you're gone.
Anyone who gets involved with someone in the emergency services probably needs to be someone that is very good at life already.
Yeah. Independent.
Independent. Yeah. The person better know how to find the gas shut off themselves because their husband or wife is maybe not going to be home for a few days.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing though. So you basically had like 17 years of being having insomnia.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I didn't know what a good night's sleep was.
Yeah.
And I'm still very, I'm a very light sleeper. I
Mhm.
still am. Years after I'm no longer in the profession, um, and anything can wake me up and I'm fully awake.
Yeah.
It was the training, presumably, that did that. No.
And
And it's a little annoying to my wife.
but you saved lives.
I I hoped I helped.
Yeah. So walk me through kind of like how this career change progressed. So you went into more disaster response, emergency response. You got into training other people. How long did that part of your career last?
That part lasted about another 4 or 5 years. Um, and no, a little less. That was about 2 years
Mm.
of my career, and then I'm coming up on 20 years, and I was still interested in knowing what else was going on in the city. So I took the test to become a fire inspector.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now, as a fire inspector, it helps to have a whole bunch of certifications that are specific to, chemical identification and vegetation patterns,
Hmm.
and building codes, something entirely different from what I'd been doing in the field, but still attached to this organization, the fire department.
So what is a fire inspector exactly? Obviously, you inspect. What exactly are you inspecting, and who are you inspecting?
Yes. Well, in the city of LA, a fire inspector has the authority by the city charter to enter any building in the city. I will correct that. If the building is owned by the state of California, the federal government, a larger entity, no. But any building in the city of LA, we are allowed with notification of the owner to go on any sort of property, look for various kinds of hazards. Um, the
So this is 100% like preemptive.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it's looking for problems that aren't there yet, and either asking or requiring the person to fix them.
Mm.
Um, so a fire inspector will show up at your local hotel and walk through the hotel, and if uh, you know uh, exits that are mandatory exits are somehow blocked, the doors are locked or something like that, we'll give them notification. You open those up now,
Mhm.
um, because the important thing for the fire department is that any building be able to let the people out in a quick manner to save lives. Um, we might not save the building in times of fire or disaster like a terrible earthquake, but if the building fails in the right manner that allows people to get out, we think that's a win.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's amazing. So, you know, so you ended up becoming a fire inspector?
I did. I
Yeah.
became a fire inspector, did that for several years. I was a brush inspector. So,
Oh, we're gonna have
some of
such a
the
great chat on this.
oh my goodness. Some of those hillsides that you've seen in the Palisades fire, footage. Um, there were times when I was standing on those hillsides, doing doing fire inspections and getting homeowners to clear their brush further away from their houses, things
Mhm,
like that.
mhm.
Um, so it this pretty sad moment right now.
Yeah.
I know those areas pretty well.
Yeah, it's not the best, and it's amazing that you were a fire inspector at a time where you were actually looking at the exact same places that had just burned.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Trying to be proactive. That is one of the major, um, one of the major missions of the fire department is to figure out what could happen and then figure out what can I do to either stop it from happening or ameliorate it, and do as much as possible.
So, I mean, I've read a lot of the news, everyone's talking about 100-mile-an-hour winds, once in a generation tragedy. Was it man-made? Was it an act of nature or whatever? I mean, people are still trying to figure it out. But you as a fire inspector, with your fire inspector cap on, you're going out to the Pacific Palisades. Like, are you guys all just knowing that this place is just a tinderbox waiting to go up, or were you like, there's definitely risk here, but it can be managed or mitigated? Like, where was the thinking back when you were an inspector in the Palisades?
And that would have been in the early 2000s. Yes, we most of us had the opinion that absent a huge series of mishaps, including 100-mile-an-hour winds, that we were doing a lot of good defensible space for structures and people, and a lot of working with the Department of Transportation, and signage and things like that. There were some streets that were so narrow you only allow parking on one side of the street, and that's so people can evacuate
Mhm.
if they need to. Um, and so a lot of thinking went into that. I remember being pretty confident that we could keep the Palisades safe, um, absent your 100-year disaster that we've just had. Yeah.
I was speaking with another retired firefighter, and he worked in Brentwood, and he was up in the Pacific Palisades quite a bit as well, and working through Brentwood. And he was just saying, he didn't exactly explain to me the fire inspector role the way you mentioned it, but he said, like, firefighters would go up, and knock on doors and be like, "Hey guys, like, you got to clear this brush. It's a fire hazard. You got to keep your lawn clean. You got to, collect all the leaves and get all the, branches that have fallen and get all that stuff out of the way, because that's the stuff that gets lit first when if there's a serious incident." And he was just saying, like, it was a real challenge because the I guess the fire department wasn't in a position to, like, fine people, so they were just kind of, like, giving people advice about how to do things better, but it was, like, a little bit toothless, and sometimes
Mm.
people would ignore it. I don't know if that you had a similar, opinion, 'cause Brian was in the palace, like, Brian has only been retired for a year, so, he was in Brentwood, I think it was the number 19 station. He was there for, 7 or 8 years working in Brentwood in the Palisades. Yeah.
I'll say hi to him. I was assigned to Fire Station 19 for about 4 years myself.
Oh, really? Did you
We
did you know him, Brian Howard?
I don't know that I know him.
He is huge. He's like 6'6" or 6'7". He played American football, and he's got big smile. I'll show you his photo, but
Show me.
yeah, yeah, he's so sweet.
I may have met him.
Yeah.
There are about 3,500 firefighters working for LA City Fire, so I knew a lot of them, but I don't know everyone. But yeah,
That's not very many though, is it?
no, it's not.
Yeah,
No,
for a city of like 30 million people, 3,500 firefighters, that's one firefighter per 1,000 people.
uh, um, yeah, the city of LA, the county of LA has somewhere between 10 and 11 million, and the city of LA is about 5 million of that. But we're also 400 square miles. That's how big. That's the footprint of the city of LA, and yeah, we what the theory of the city of LA is that, and see if I can say this the right way. We try to be nimble. We put 108, we have 108 fire stations,
Mhm.
and lots of apparatus in each of those fire stations. They're pretty far apart, but because we have such good passageways and things like that, we think, absent, that once in a while, disaster, we can get any resources we need to someplace pretty quickly just by pulling them from other areas. Um, so more fire stations and more firefighters would make sense. But we're on a good day, we've got enough.
On a good day.
On a good
Yeah.
day, we
It's funny, like I said, like I've lived all over the world, and like I lived in Asia, I've lived in the Middle East, I've lived in Europe, and the natural disasters that seem to happen in the United States just seem to be so intense, and especially in California, like you've got to be ready for earthquakes, you've got to be ready for strong winds and wildfires, you've got to be ready for crime. Like it just seems like if it's going to happen, it's going to happen here, and you just have to be ready for absolutely everything all the time. And that must just be that keeping that level of preparedness must be exhausting.
got to do a lot of training and just pay attention.
Yeah, it's not so easy. So when did you eventually retire from the fire department?
Well, the next thing I did was, I went for my captain's exams
Oh yes, after being an inspector.
after being an inspector,
Yeah.
and became a captain and went back to our training facility,
Oh,
and so my last assignment was actually, what we call medical liaison, where I was in charge of getting medical care for sick and injured firefighters.
oh, okay.
So that's when I learned about the work comp system and things like that. So I learned a lot about government at that point, that had been obscure to me before.
Mm.
Um,
Must have been eye opening.
it was, and but we it was a good career. I met a lot of people that I'm still in touch with, and that I was quite quite pleased and honored to work with. So,
It was about 25 years.
33 years,
33 years in the service.
33 years.
Yeah. I always thought a fire captain was in the fire stations with the firefighters, and he was just in charge of he or she was just in charge of the fire station. I didn't know fire captains also did training of new recruits and stuff like that.
Yeah, fire captain is like a first level supervisor.
Mhm.
Next is various levels of chief
Mhm.
in on the West Coast. Yeah, so a fire captain is in charge of each fire station, and in charge of the stations that have the fire boats and things like that. But yeah, then there's a floating cadre of captains that aren't in the stations and are doing the other things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wild. Wild. And what was it like to eventually retire after 33 years?
Um, It was it wasn't unexpected. I knew there was a date when I was going to leave. And when you're 60 years old and you're looking at, well, how many more years can I spend, 24 hours up and doing things? It was time to leave, but I was a little sad. I was a little sad,
And
but I went. In fact, another story. I guess I didn't want to admit to people that I was retired. So instead, I went down to Central Casting and put my name and photograph in, and I became a background actor.
okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
So
Well,
so instead of telling people I was retired, I would say I'm an unemployed actor.
that's much more acceptable, isn't it?
It was in this town.
Yeah.
It doesn't cause an eye blink. They go, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we know a lot of you guys
Everywhere.
everywhere."
Well, I mean, here's a question. After 33 years, I mean, do you still have to be able to do the fitness training, like the same level of fitness, like carrying an 80-pound body up 4 flights of stairs? Like, do you still have to do that every year of your 33 years, or do
I
you just have
did.
to do it? Do you just have to do it like when you're starting out?
Nope, nope. I always had to maintain that basic level of fitness.
That's insane.
It kept me thin.
Because, you know, like, and I don't wanna call out California in general or Los Angeles in general, but whenever there's a disaster anywhere in the world, you always see the fire chiefs or the police chiefs, and they're always a little bit more heavy set and a little bit, not looking like they've really been in the training. And I'm just curious, like, are these people still like carrying 80-pound bodies up 4 flights of stairs?
They're probably not. By the time you're at chief officer level, you're doing a lot more administrative work, and if you're smart, you maintain your level of fitness.
Hmm.
But we don't look at them quite as hard, saying, come on, chief, you know, run up these stairs with us."
Yeah.
Well, actually, we do.
They're
We
too
keep,
busy doing paperwork.
yeah, they're keeping the citizens safe. So
Absolutely. So, okay, so I know you're an author, and you've published some books, and I think also a screenplay I read as well, maybe. Or
not a screenplay.
uh,
Yes, I became both a fiction and nonfiction author. In fact, I've got a novel coming out in a couple of months, science fiction, and I'm working on a career manual for people in the emergency services. Um, but yeah, I brought a couple of my books here, and I'd like to give them to you if I can.
that'd be amazing. I want to come back to your your transition from
Yes.
being a fire captain to an author. Your second time around as being an author, third time around as being an author. But maybe we can just talk about the Palisades and Pasadena for a bit. So, okay, so here we are, like, we've just had New Year's. Everyone's getting ready to enjoy 2025. And I think it was like 6 days in, January 6th, um, you know, Tuesday afternoon, we get smoke in the hills above the Pacific Palisades. And I go hiking out there all the time.
Mhm.
Every weekend I go hiking out in the Palisades over the mountains, Topanga and all that stuff. And every time I'm just amazed at how dry everything is.
Yes.
And of course, um, you know, we I know in 2024, I know it rained a bit in January and it rained a bit in February, and then it didn't rain at all until, it still hasn't rained. So so we're talking like by January 6th, we're talking about like probably driest possible conditions on the planet. And then a fire breaks out in the hills. Like, do you know any intel or anything that we don't know as the public? Like, did someone start the fire? Like, was it arson, or did a power line fall, or I mean, what's going on up there?
Boy, that's still under investigation. Yeah. I don't have any insider information. Sorry. The 3 or 4 ways that a fire starts is accidentally, somebody drives their car off the road and a catalytic converter, sets grass on fire,
Yeah.
or something other human caused, like a power line comes down and starts a fire, or nature messes with us and sends down a bolt of lightning that causes quite a number of uh, forest fires and such.
Especially in the
Sure.
national parks. Yeah, I see that
Yeah,
quite a bit.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then there is mischief. There are people that will go out and deliberately start a fire.
Hmm.
Um, and that may have happened on some of our little fires here.
Yeah.
Um, I've not been studying that specifically for this series of fires. But those are the 4 major ways that we get fires in urban interface areas and in urban-like areas.
Yeah.
Um, and 3 of the 4 are, some sort of accident.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then one mad man or woman just running around getting joy from lighting things on fire, which is terrifying.
right.
Yeah.
And that's the person it's okay for all the neighbors to tackle and hold down until the police get there to take them away.
Yeah, well, they found a few of them, didn't they? Like
I
they caught a couple arsonists. Yeah, especially the Runyon Canyon. That was an
That
arsonist, and they
was,
they they grabbed a whole. I mean, I think they collected more than like 20 or 25 people that were out like setting fires, looters. Like it's
people.
insane.
Some people, think it's fun, or some people take advantage.
Hmm.
Um, when when I would talk with our arson investigators, so our fire department is big enough that we have our own arson investigator department. They work with the police.
Hmm.
In some communities, the police department is charged with investigating arson fires. Um, but while LAPD does do that, we have our own unit that that is very much understands fire,
Mm.
and so does that. Um, and so when I talked with them, I said, "Yeah," it says, "we try to get to the scene of a fire as soon as possible, and before we even, examine the fire site, we look around to see who's watching." Because it's human nature quite often that arsonist will have circled back and be part of the onlookers just to see what's going on.
That's crazy.
Some are caught that way because, you look at the crowd, we're not gonna accuse anybody, but, uh,
Someone looks a little too excited.
uh-huh, someone looks, or
Everyone else is in tears because they lost their home, and one guy's just grinning ear to ear.
it that's a clue.
Yeah. Terrible to laugh about, but
Oh,
yeah, that's amazing that you do catch people like that.
mhm.
Yeah. So this fire investigation unit, so they've obviously been working overtime the
Oh,
last couple weeks, like,
yeah.
and it's amazing that still, like, here we are. What is it, January 24th? This will
But
come up. This conversation will probably come out a little bit next week or the week after in February, but like, still to this day, we still don't really have any answer as to what happened. I mean,
no,
it's really frustrating, I think, especially for people who have lost their homes.
they're uh, people who've lost their homes are going to be traumatized for a long time, and everyone does want answers. I get the impression that that various investigations are ongoing, and evidence has been accumulated, um, but nobody's going to, until we really know for sure. You're not going to accuse a particular thing happening.
Mhm.
So, was it a power line that came down? Well, we got evidence we're looking at. Was it arson? Well, we caught some. Was it just bad luck?
Yeah.
Um, somebody was having a now this is supposition, but somebody might be having a fire in their backyard.
Right.
Little something like that. 100-mile wind comes in, picks up a flaming ember, and can't catch it. It's gone. It's about to do some mischief.
Mhm.
That kind of so I don't have any answers for you, but we're all waiting for them.
It's interesting because, like, I'd been out to the Palisades before. There were a few people out there that I would go out and meet from time to time for work and stuff like that, and I was always amazed at just how beautiful and eclectic the old homes are. Like, they're all like 50, 60, 70, 80 years old homes. They all had such character, a lot of them. I mean, some of them were rebuilt, and actually the ones that were rebuilt are some of the ones that survived the fire, actually. And they didn't even really have very sophisticated fire defense systems. They just had fire retardant paint and maybe a fire retardant roof, and that was enough to
And
get it
sometimes
through.
it is, yeah.
But you think about all these beautiful old homes, and forget about what was in them, but just the architecture and the architecture of the communities that were lost is something that won't be replaced. Like, whatever gets rebuilt in there is not gonna look the same. I mean, it's gonna be 2025, cookie cutter maybe. I mean, I'm really wondering whether we're gonna see, like, those big single family homes again, or whether we're gonna see multifamily, condo units, or even high rises. I mean,
Mm,
I mean, the rebuild will be incredibly interesting, but I was just kinda wondering, like, as a fire inspector during your era, would you have been called in to do that kind of investigation? Or because I know you were doing more preemptive stuff, but I'm just wondering if it would have been like an all hands on deck, like, we need all of our best people to figure out what the hell just happened.
if depending upon how large an incident is, you keep pulling in more people and more specialized knowledge. Yeah, I would have been walking some of the areas because I would have known those hillsides intimately and might be able to help the arson investigator, find the ignition point of the fire or
Mhm.
something like that. Um, but yeah, it's we ramp up depending on the severity and size of any incident.
Mhm.
So, some something you can put out with a garden hose, you probably won't even, get more than one fire engine to come out and inspect, make sure you did it right. And you lose a whole block, you're going to get the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty insane. Like, as someone who knows the fire department as intimately as you do, 33 years on the job and things like that, like, have you been frustrated by the way the media's kind of like portrayed this entire disaster? I mean, and if so, like, what are the key kind of sticking points that you have issues with?
Oh,
That's going to be a big one. That was a big sigh. That was a big sigh. Okay, here we go.
oh dear.
Yeah.
Yeah, putting me on the spot here. Well, I love our media.
We I mean, I'd rather look at it. I mean, like obviously, people have tons of opinions about the police department and the police chief and the responsiveness and the reservoir and all these kind of key issues that were in the news. And we can talk about that as you see fit. But I'm just like, because the guys that were out there,
Mhm.
what the manual says about how to contain or how to try to defeat a fire like that. Like the protocol for going out there and risking your life and trying to save people and property, right? Like that's the job. And I'm just curious, like knowing what you know in your heart and knowing, and I'm sure you still have friends that are out there fighting fires. Like, was it really portrayed in a way that you felt like was respectful, or did you feel like they got the story right?
What I've known for all of my career is that the newspapers and the media in general are looking for a story that touches a person's heart. And while they do try to get some of their facts right, wait a minute, let me rephrase that. They do try to get their facts right. The thrust of most stories is to get an emotional response from the person. So
You might have had more factual integrity on your paper when you were 12 years old.
there is that possibility.
It's a bit of a low blow, but I had to say it. I had to say
I know, I know. You had to say it.
it.
Um, but yeah. So I always tell people, don't believe the first story you hear.
Mhm.
Listen for follow on as they learn more, they get more and more accurate. So um, yeah. The one that did kind of bother me was the accusation that why didn't the fire chief, Kristen Crowley, whom I knew and worked with for quite a number of years, and she's sharp. Whoa, what a sharp human being. Why didn't they keep the off-going crew, 1,000 firefighters? Why didn't they keep them, on the job? Because look at how bad it was, when the fire hit. And the and I go, well, the Palisades fire started about 10:30 in the morning, 4 hours after change of shift.
Mhm.
Before that, there had been several alerts from the National Weather Service of severe alerts. If you're going to keep 1,000 people on the job earning overtime,
Mhm.
um,
Because of strong winds.
because of strong winds and because of an alert, it's not going to take long before people are going to say, "Why is the fire department spending so much money, for nothing?"
Mhm.
So it's kind of a balancing thing. So they let the off-going shift go home. 1,000 firefighters that could have been on the job at 10:30 in the morning, but the fires didn't really get away from the resources on hand for several hours.
So just so we're on the same page, the standard firefighter shift is 6 a.m. to 6 a.m., so 24 hours. So
24 hours,
so
from
so by
6:30 to 6:30,
yeah.
basically. Yeah, yeah.
So you're saying that the fire kind of didn't start till 10:30, and by then, there was already a shift change. So keeping those firefighters that had just gone home in the stations and ready, but with no fire to fight would have been kind of ludicrous because I wouldn't have followed any protocol.
Right, wouldn't
Yeah.
followed any protocol. The city council would not have been pleased with the fire chief for that. And but that's why we have recall procedures if we need more resources coming back. So I think she made a good call. Um, let a normal shift change take place, the normal 1,000 plus firefighters on duty, and when we started, being overwhelmed by the various fires and how quickly they moved, then starting calling people back is procedure, and it wasn't that the fire department top brass messed up. They followed what was reasonable procedure for the time. It's just, you know, no rain for measurable rain for years, basically, 100-mile winds. It all came together in the wrong series of events to be manageable.
Yeah.
We lost it.
So one firefighter that I was speaking with, Brian, actually, from
Right.
from number 19, he was saying that the way the fire started was really dangerous because it was up in the hills, and he said like you can't drive up there with a truck and get a hose long enough to put it out. Like it was up on the side of a mountain. Like those are hiking trails only. And he was saying like the fact that you can't drive up there and just like hose down a whole area was the first problem. And then the second problem in his description of this was it was so windy that the helicopters couldn't go out and start putting down water because it was so windy, like it was dangerous for the helicopters to be flying.
Yes.
And then somehow between those, the location of the fire, the wind, and the danger to the helicopter pilots, between those like three things, that kind of led the fire to just getting completely out of control.
I agree with his assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And basically you're playing catch up at that point, and hope you can stop it, where you can put the resources.
Hmm.
And but once again, we talk about 100-mile-an-hour winds. If you've ever, thrown a stick up into the air during a high wind event and seen how far it just sails, we haven't mastered 100-mile winds yet.
No. No, and like you said too, like, one house can be on fire and an ember can, flick off of a roof and go like 10 blocks and hit another roof and that house will catch on fire. Like it's not like it's going house to house to house
Right.
because the wind spreads this stuff. So my friend David, he's a photographer and he's been covering the wildfires for the last few weeks. And I did a podcast with him and he came in and he showed his photos and stuff like that. And it was crazy because you would see one house that was still standing and then another house next to it burnt. And it's just because the wind was going in the opposite way, right? And it's like, and he was just, so much of it was based on like wind and potential new construction materials for newer homes. He saw a lot of newer homes that managed to stay up, and he was just kind of in shock and awe of the damage and loss of property.
It's going to be years before that community is whole again.
Mm,
We've got a lot of rebuilding to do.
yeah,
Once we finally get the fires out, by the way.
yeah,
As
they're
you and I
still
are
going.
sitting here, there are still fires that have not been conquered yet.
Well, I was flying today out of Van Nuys, and I was flying up, and we didn't go over to the Malibu and the Palisades section because I think there's still quite a lot of activity over there, and there's a bit of a no-fly zone. But we were kind of around the San Fernando Valley and in the Simi Valley, and the skies were pretty clear. Like we couldn't see anything actively kind of smoking up and things like that. So it seems like the fires are still kind of cooking, but they're much more contained and under control now because we don't even have any evacuation areas anymore, and that was a big thing for a few weeks there.
Mhm. We'll keep our fingers crossed. Yeah, it's fun hearing that you're learning how to fly. Van Nuys Airport. When you go there, why don't you stop by and visit our fleet, because the fire department's 5 helicopters are stationed at Van Nuys Airport.
I've seen the helicopters, and I also saw these big red planes that look like they scoop water, and they were there on the
Yes.
tarmac today too. I saw those.
Most of those planes, if they're not borrowed from the CDC or something like that, are a private company from Canada. We basically lease those planes and their pilots for several months a year during our high fire times, and so yeah, we so glad they're here.
It's funny too because when you talk about high fire times, like most people equate California wildfires with the summer because that's when it's hot and that's when it's dry, and that's when people are out camping and things like that, and that's when accidents happen and fires happen. But this one happened like in the middle of winter, like January. But of course, people don't get that we don't get snow here and we almost never get rain, so it's
Right.
just as dry in January as it is in the summer in some cases. And then of course you have Santa Ana winds, so the wind's not coming off the water with any moisture. It's coming out of the desert and it's just hot and dry and fast. And that seemed to be like the killer combo.
That was it. That
Yeah.
was it.
Do you wish you were still active and you had the chance to help, or does that kind of still go through your veins?
Um, a little bit.
Because obviously
There's a lot.
it's a dangerous situation.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. Well, mostly I man some phones and talk to people and spread some information and
Mhm.
yeah. Well, we have rescue crews that came up from Mexico, down from Oregon, and
Utah, Nevada, Arizona.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And of course, when they have to move these big fire trucks, only the biggest airplanes will take something like a fire truck,
Mm.
and most organizations don't have that, so they drove them here. So, and probably they stayed up 24 hours while they were driving,
Yeah.
and then they get here and we put them to work.
Yeah. Is there any protocol for the fire department to like re-enlist people like yourself who have retired and gone on to other things, but still have 33 years of incredible experience? Like, I mean,
There is not, you and several of my former comrades who are also retired, mostly in the captain range, have been saying, "Oh, I wish there was a way that I because they were calling in volunteering. Sometimes you can, embed yourself with a CERT team, community emergency response team, but they're not designed to fight active fires.
mhm.
So there is not right now, but stay tuned.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody will think it's a good idea and organize a cadre of old timers.
Well, I just think like, 33 years of experience is not nothing, right? And I'm sure, if you were out there with them, assuming you wanted to be out there with them or you had the opportunity to be called back, I'm sure like that wisdom and knowledge would have helped. I mean, nothing wrong with all these young firefighters, they're super fit and they're climbing up ladders and saving people's lives. But then also too, like, 33 years of knowledge is not nothing.
Well, I'm glad they're here. Yeah, yeah. Anything I could do to help, I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wild. Well, hopefully these fires kind of die out soon, and then we don't have anyone starting any new ones.
The forecast is for rain this weekend,
Oh wow.
and hopefully it does arrive, and not in monsoon amounts.
Yeah, because that was back. I mean, remember when the flooding here was what 2023, like November, December. Remember it rained so hard there was like massive floods all through Malibu and stuff. So it just seems like Malibu and the Pacific Palisades, beautiful place to live, but just every year something crazy is going on.
Yeah, who up there doesn't like them? Come on.
Yeah.
No, it's we live on a world that has active weather, and as much as we think we're in control, not always.
Yeah. I think that's the number one thing you learn if you have to, work in disaster or emergency rescue, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't always stop it.
Yeah.
Just do what you can.
Do you still have any friends that are like active firefighters that might have been like telling you some stories about what they were seeing out in the field? Like, do you have anything like that that you might want to share?
I don't have right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm mostly plugged into the retired guys.
Safer.
Yeah.
I know Brian had a bunch of people that were out there fighting the fires and they were still active because he's only a year out of the service, being retired. So he still had quite a lot of people and he was quite worried because, you get into one of those neighborhoods and, the fire can start behind you. You're fighting a fire in front of you. Next thing you know, you're completely surrounded by fire. Like it can really get out of hand.
And the water situation is chancy, and
Mhm.
so if you run out of water, there are ways to shelter in place. Many fire engines have fire curtains that you can drop down. You can hide in the fire truck.
Oh,
If
really? The
if
fire
the
truck?
Yeah, if the fire is sweeping over you,
Hmm.
um, it's a way to survive. And people, especially on fire lines, have individual, uh, basically reflective pop tents. If a fire is going to overrun you, you spread that out and you climb under it. Um, those will save your life. It's never pleasant to be in that at that time. But you hope that you picked the right spot to fight fire from. That you've got a little bit of safety while you're doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just amazing. Like this reservoir that wasn't full, the fire hydrants were lacking pressure in some places, but some people say that was maybe because of the reservoir. Some people say that was because of overuse, because there was such a big disaster that there were too many people plugged into the fire hydrant system at different times. But I mean, just like when are the investigators going to release something that addresses all of these concerns? Because it gets worse day by day
Mhm.
when there's no authority coming out and saying, "This is what happened."
I'm waiting for that report to come out. Yes.
Yeah, because I mean, with your eyes and with your experience and with the things you've seen, you must be able to really be interested in something like that and really be able to understand every word of it. Whereas, layman people like me are going to listen to the news and have someone in the news kind of dictate the highlights or the punchlines.
Mm. When it comes out, I'll read it, and if you want it, we'll have a conversation about it.
It would be great. It'd be great. But yeah, I mean, fire aside and your 33-year career aside, what's it been like kind of transitioning into maybe a slower pace of life and getting back into the writing world?
Yeah, you pointed out that, gee, I must have been sleep deprived, during and it was true, for about 6 months after I retired, and I kept getting a good night's sleep. I didn't didn't realize that, boy, after about 6 months, I mean, says, "Boy, I've got a lot of energy now. I mean, I'm I'm not tired all the time."
Yeah.
It was it is always, life is an adventure. Life is, you wanna just have as good a life as you can. So, there I was retired. I had a young son, 11 years old, so I got to spend more time with him.
Mhm.
Um, Reconnected with a lot of friends, and, I'd already been since I'd been writing, training manuals in the daytime for the fire department and was dabbling in writing fiction at night, I just switched over full time.
Mhm.
And so, brought out a nonfiction book on a subject I was interested in, and brought out a science fiction novel, and just
What are
kept
they
going.
called? What are they about?
So the nonfiction book is actually a book on a social phenomenon called polyamory.
Mhm.
So, in polyamory, most people know that term now, but, in polyamory, which translates out to many loves, it's a community where it's people that are okay with or think that they can have, um, emotional connections and love relationships with more than one person at a time and do it ethically.
Mhm.
Um, and this has grown to, about 5% of the population now. In the 1970s, there was almost no one. It was being invented, basically. Not multiple relationships wasn't being invented, but the way of doing it that was ethical and everybody knows everybody, and it was being invented. And so I chronicle that period from about 1967 to the present day of how people invented things, ways of doing things, and ways of thinking. Um, and uh, and so the polyamory communities around the country are are talked about in this book, called 50 Years of Polyamory in America, a guided tour of a growing. Why did I remember? See, I need to get a drink of water.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's a growing community. So there was that. At the same time, I indulged in writing, not writing fiction, so science fiction. Um, I've always somehow known people who were authors. I don't know why.
Mhm.
Um, so I knew a lot of people in the science fiction community. I knew Larry Niven. Larry Niven's still with us. Jerry Pornell, Steve Barnes, Harry Turtledove, people like that, and they always encouraged me to write and said, and send it out. And so I would send out a short story and get a rejection.
Mhm.
And it said, "Well, you're not a real." Jerry Pornell would say, "Well, you're not a real writer if you don't send out the next story too."
Right.
So, okay, Jerry. And so I did, and eventually I had enough short stories to put out a book of short stories, which I self-published. And then I finished an adventure novel called Desperate Endeavor that I shopped to major publishers, and a small publisher took it.
Okay.
So I've now had both experiences, traditionally published and self-published.
And which experience did you like more?
Um, since I'm a really lousy artist, and the idea of designing a front cover and a back cover and things, there was so much more work in self-publishing. I I like having a publisher that has people that know how to do all that stuff.
Like a graphic designer?
Like a graphic designer. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. And somebody that can write blurbs and format pages so that it looks nice. And
Mhm.
so yeah, so um for the people that are very avid self-publishers, my hat's off to them, but they've got like they're doing 9 different jobs, not
Mhm.
just a writer's job, to get that out to the public.
Yeah, that's what happens, isn't it? It's like, you might have more control or more say over where, how things look and how things get consumed by readers and things like that. But it's true, you end up just doing everything other than writing.
Yes.
Yeah,
How they find time to write their next book, I don't know.
yeah. So, what was your adventure book about?
Oh, Desperate Endeavor is a hard science fiction novel,
Mm.
taking place, hundreds of years from now. And it is it's sort of a novel. The novel starts 35 years after a war. So I didn't want to write a novel about a war per se, or an apocalypse or anything like that. But here we are. We ran into an alien race, and they didn't like us. So they attacked us. And then they said, "Oh, no, we didn't really mean to attack you. We'll be, we want to be your friends and hire you to do basic research for us." And that was the setup. So the story starts 35 years after that war happened, and the main character is wondering, this doesn't make any sense. Why did that alien race, attack us and then quit when they were winning? And what's really going on? So it's actually a sort of a novel of him trying to figure out the alien motivation and finding clues and realizing that, oh, the war's not over.
Mm.
This is just the phase where they're trying to get everything out of us before hostilities start again. And how's he going to save the human race? So it was that kind of that kind of
Interesting.
adventure story.
A nice little period piece, like, where they're trying to milk us for everything we've got before they exterminate us.
Yeah, exactly. I figured I hadn't seen that done in fiction yet. I said, so, well, doesn't that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
If you're an alien race, don't you want to get everything out of your opponent you can if you can fool them?
Hmm.
And you know, human beings in my story were kind of gullible. They believed them.
I think we're all a little bit like that these days.
I, it could be. It could.
I think everyone is just so shell shocked. I mean, I think like, my generation specifically, I think like I was born in the late 70s, grew up in the 80s and 90s, went to university and things like that. Like we've been like super sheltered. Like we really have, like we didn't have a Vietnam War. We didn't make it through World War II. Like my parents were born after the Depression. We were born after the war. Like so we don't have that lineage of surviving, through those eras. But like, the pandemic was like our big event,
Yes.
right? Like, 3 or 4 years of just absolute chaos. And you do like, you realize like how gullible we are, like how we'll all just, bend to the will of someone who has a microphone on television and tells us to do A, B, or C, right? And it just, yeah, that just kind of sparked a memory of everyone just, obeying and being a little bit gullible against alternative motives.
And in real life, we're reminded that our infrastructure is kind of fragile. We are, we are dependent on each other, and yes, the onions that you pick up at the grocery store, came from 2 states away.
Mm.
And if, trucks can't travel, things like that, suddenly, we're all, facing shortages and stuff like that. So it was in only that way, I would say it was kind of a good wake-up call to remind people how interconnected we are, and how we have to work to keep it that way.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah, no, it's not easy. I mean, did you ever have the chance to do any creative writing while you were actually on the force, like where you're firefighting? Like, did you ever have downtime? Did you ever have like vacations or you took where you just write, or was it something that you just like began pursuing again like after you retired? Because I'm always curious, like you said, 24 hours on, 24 hours off. That's such a grueling schedule. I mean, do you even have any like mental capacity on your days off to put pen to paper and be creative?
It's it starts with a daydream, for me. I'm not sure about some writers. I go, what if? Okay. So and yeah, between calls, I would sometimes, write in a notebook, jot down little ideas. I wonder, if a vampire was living in London uh, during the Blitz of World War II, what would his life be like?
Mhm.
And just and then on days off when I couldn't get to sleep, yeah, I would sit down and I'd write a little. And that, by the way, turned into one of the short stories that's in my book.
Mhm.
So yeah, it all starts with a I wonder, but so I would say my ability to produce pages of writing was pretty limited
Mm.
while my life was busy doing other things.
Mhm.
But the brain's always looking around and saying, "Oh, what if? I wonder."
Do you have a great firefighter, character coming out in one of your future books? Because I mean, you know this world so intimately. I could imagine, like, you could create a scenario or some kind of world, futuristic, past, whatever, but, have a firefighter as the main kinda villain or hero, and I mean, because that's your world, like, I mean, the details that you could go into about life in the station and politics on the job and backgrounds of other firefighters and where people come from, like, you've seen all that already. I mean, that would be very interesting.
I am going to think about that carefully.
Mm.
I've always admired Joseph Wambaugh. You know, he was
Who's Joseph Wamp?
Joseph Wambaugh is an author who, was a police officer for about 5 years and then quit the force, and started writing police procedural novels.
Yeah,
Um, and I said, "Hey," but I was so busy and so involved in the profession that I never thought about doing anything fictional of it.
sure.
But now I'm a step away, and that's a possibility.
Well,
I may have to dedicate my next novel to you, Ryan.
I was just thinking of, Taylor Sheridan, the writer who does, like, Yellowstone and all that stuff, because he was an actual cowboy and he worked on a ranch so he wrote about what he lived, right? He wrote about working on a ranch and with other cowboys, and some of them
Yeah.
come right out of prison and some of them, he just writes what was around him, yeah, he's had some success. It's been very interesting to see a writer who actually kinda grew up in that world and the level of detail with the characters and the way he writes all the characters and their interactions and stuff like that. It's just very, authentic. But I mean, you having existed in that world for 33 years, I mean, you must have picked up on all these nuances of how people talk and where people are from and really have the chance to kind of breathe life into some characters.
I am going to consider what you said. No, that makes sense. That
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. No, I haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
I've stayed away from our real world experiences. Well, not exactly. I've put in either my short stories or my novels some of my skills. Right. So I'm also for many years was a scuba diver, and that was one of the things that I did while studying marine biology. I'd get out there and swim with the fishes. Um,
That's the only reason anyone wants to be a marine biologist.
exactly, yeah, fill my tank, I'm going down again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so things about the ocean and things about, pressurization and things have crept into, some of my stories and my novels, so,
Mm.
yeah, as a writer, take everything that you know and everything that you've experienced and grind it up and put it in a story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
as
throw it
you
against the wall, see what sticks.
exactly. See what the editor will buy.
It's so hard, isn't it?
I know.
So I mean, what are you working on at the moment? Like, do you have any new projects that are about to come out, or do you have anything that you're currently writing or working on?
Mhm. I've got the last edit that I'm doing for a novel that hopes comes out in about, May or June of this year, 2025, also science fiction. And I've restarted, writing my manual that's tentatively called Street Smarts, which is a career manual for the emergency worker and for those who love them.
Mm.
So, yeah, I'll be talking about the real world things that happen to that person out there fighting the fire and delivering the baby and trying to cut a person who is terribly injured out of a car that's wrecked on the freeway and knowing that you've got a very limited amount of time
Mhm.
to get them out because you know they're really in bad shape.
Mhm.
But if you do it the wrong way, you worsen their condition. You put them in danger. So
Right.
do it fast, do it right, do it at 3 in the morning, by flashlight. So yeah, and then you go home and the spouse says, "How was your day, honey?" "Fine." Uh, what does that
That's
mean?
gotta be the toughest.
It the transition back to a civilian mindset is difficult for some first responders.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will probably be addressing that. And who knows, now that you've mentioned it, I may start writing some fiction also with, you know,
What was the biggest disaster you had to deal with when you were in the force? When you were firefighting?
I was on duty during the 94 earthquake in Northridge,
Which was huge, I heard.
which was huge.
Gas lines were bursting, houses were on fire everywhere.
We had several of the several trailer parks that basically caught on fire. Um, we found out that sometimes you didn't build your parking structures strongly enough, and several parking structures pancaked down with people in them.
Holy
Um,
shit, really?
oh yes, oh yes. Um, th- there was happy ending in most of those. The people just happened to be in the right place where their cars shielded them, and while they were pinned in, most people were not actually hurt, and it just took hours to move tons and tons of concrete out of the way to get them.
But if a parking garage pancakes like that, the entire structure above it is a write-off, right? Like, you
Oh
can't.
yeah,
Yeah. So there were entire buildings that had to be crumbled.
absolutely, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, we learned a lot from that. The Van Norman Dam was drained immediately so that that part of the San Fernando Valley wouldn't be inundated if the dam was more damaged than we thought.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so the 94 earthquake was probably the big one for me because it lasted for days and days and days, and you had to move a lot of resources around.
Did you have to work like 3, 4 days in a row during that time? Like, how intense was that for you? And what level of seniority were you in '94 when that happened?
At that time, I was simply a paramedic assigned to a fire station. So I had a paramedic rescue ambulance that I was in charge of. Um, and interestingly, for the first 24 hours, I was not in the San Fernando Valley. I was at another fire station down in Wilmington. They stripped the whole area of fire resources, and I ran every kind of call down there in an area that was like 10 times my normal area. So, yeah, I spent 36 hours with no sleep at all, doing medical things, doing lockouts, doing wellness checks.
Mhm.
A wellness check is something that every uh, fire department and police department does have to deal with. A concerned person calls in from somewhere else, out of state or something, saying, "Hey, I can't reach my Aunt Hattie. She's not answering her phone. I don't have any of the neighbors' phone numbers. Can you just go by and check and see if she's okay?"
That's the firefighter's job?
Firefighters will do that, and police do that.
Hmm.
So
I didn't know. That's interesting.
yeah, we're not advertising that too much, but I mean, yeah, but I
Don't
mean,
call us. Don't call it.
if you're really concerned and it's important, yes, call us. But um, yeah, that's one of those things we don't advertise that we do. So yeah, for 36 hours, I was doing all those kind of calls uh, in an expanded area, And then they said, "Hey, you're going to the valley." Oh, great.
Because it's interesting. Because, like, when you think about emergency services, you're down on the coast, down, in Wilmington, and then the earthquake happens in Northridge. So 90% of the firefighters are up in Northridge, saving people's lives. But someone still has to be in Wilmington. There's still problems. Like, I don't think a lot of people who watch the news and stuff like that, they realize, like, even though there were fires in the Pacific Palisades and out in Eden and stuff like that, like, not every firefighter could go because LA is a huge city with millions of people. Like, there still had to be firefighters at all the other stations because there's still problems
Yes.
going on. There's still accidents on the 10 and the 5, and like, there's still tons of shit going on in this town every minute of every day, that you can't just send all the firefighters to one place, because then nothing will get taken care of anywhere else, and there's always problems.
And people deserve, their rescue attempts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Babies are still being born, traffic accidents are still occurring.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, do you ever just feel overwhelmed by the chaos? Like, because I've lived in so I lived in Shanghai in China, which was a big city, like 25 million people. Um, but and then I lived in Dubai for a bit, and I was in Switzerland. Like, but Dubai and Switzerland, I always felt like were super quiet. But, like, do you ever in any of your 33 years, did you ever just feel like overwhelmed by the chaos of Los Angeles? Because I don't know if that's like the fairest comment to say, but I've only lived here for a year and it's by far the most chaotic place I've ever lived. Good and bad, good, bad, and ugly. I love people. I love, local Angelinos. It's all great. It's a beautiful city to live in, but holy shit, like stuff happens here all the time. You got to get ready for it.
It's it, it's good to get that perspective from somebody coming. We are more chaotic than Dubai. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
um, yeah. One of the things that that an emergency responder is trained to do is to see what's in front of them.
Mhm.
Um, and that's why the command structure is somebody further away from the incident is getting a more global look at it. So one way to not be overwhelmed is to pay really close attention to what's right in front of you and be effective and do that. I didn't get very many times feeling like a total overwhelm, because I would pay attention to what's the next thing I need to do. What's the next thing I need to do.
Mhm.
But yeah, so um, there's a phrase that I've recently learned called doom scrolling.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
always yes, and I've talked down several of my friends from from the edge of the precipice, saying, "Okay, turn off the media,
Mm.
stop listening to the news reports, things like that. Go have dinner." This the you know the so California is not going to slide into the ocean while you're going having dinner. So
Mhm.
yeah, so uh, I I was fortunate in that my training in my nervous system and attitudes kept me pretty well centered while I was on the job, and most people are like that. Um, and then, things will happen to anybody, but yeah.
Yeah. It's gotta be so tough. I mean, like, 'cause I mean, I'm guessing firefighters also suffer from things like PTSD and stuff like that. Like, because you guys see so much during your tenure working, and then you have to carry all that stuff with you into retirement or whatever. I mean, do you ever suffer from, like, that kind of anxiousness or those kind of memories? Like, does that ever trigger you? Do certain things you see ever, like, get to you in some way? I'm just curious, like, what it's like for someone who's seen so much.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's one of the reasons why, most fire departments have a psychologist on staff
Oh, that's good.
who can go to the fire stations during downtime and talk to, or if there had been a really horrific, experience, like an apartment fire with some fatalities, maybe children, something like that, the department psychologist will go to the fire station and take the engine company out of service and talk it out, things
Yeah.
like that. That will help reduce it. There are there are events that do bring back memories
Mhm.
for me. I'll be walking down a street and I'll go, I remember having a bad traffic accident with 6 bodies right there.
Oh,
And
Jesus, that's
and
gotta be
and go,
tough.
and it would just come out of nowhere, but and mostly go, "Yeah, but I did as much as I could. I tried my best." And I think every person has kind of memory experiences a little bit like that. And if it's bad enough, um, your fellow firefighter is gonna say, "Dude, you've gotta do something about that." Or the family will go, "Why won't he talk to me?" Or, "Why won't she talk to me
Yeah.
about," well, because sometimes that does happen. Um,
I don't think I'd be able to I don't I mean, like, the fact that you were born here and that you had such a career here and that you still live here is amazing to me because I've always moved a couple of years. I go everywhere. I'm a bit more nomadic. But for me to have all those memories, good, bad, ugly through a 33-year career like that, like, I would think, like, the only way that then I'm just speaking for me personally, knowing my own personality, my own mentality, my own way of remembering things and being triggered by things. Like, if I was to retire, I would have to leave the state. Like, I would have to like move to a totally different city where no one knows me, where I don't look at all the intersections and be like, oh, that was 94. Oh, that 88. I remember that was a bad one. Like, I would just have to pick up and move somewhere totally new because to be surrounded by because you're the first line of defense when something terrible happens. Like, that's the job of a firefighter. So most, like, obviously you'll have memories with the guys and the girls, like the colleagues and, the personalities around you. Obviously that would must have been very positive. But every night you're going out and dealing with death, like, and destruction. And that's, I think I'd have to just move, like I'd just move to Texas or Florida or some other place and start fresh.
I want you to walk around anyway because you've got to write your memoirs.
Yeah, after the memoirs are done.
Well, after the memoirs are done. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I try to remember more of the positive ones.
Yeah.
Like, I can remember, where I delivered a baby.
Mm.
Um, you know, fourth floor apartment in Hollywood. Yeah. or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, this is uh most of my memories are so positive. Most of my experiences with the people, um, with the citizens of LA, and and even with my bosses, we're pretty positive.
Oh, you're still talking to all of them?
Yeah, I could do that.
Yeah. So where did this deep interest in science fiction come from? Because you mentioned, you've put together a few books now. One was nonfiction about non-traditional relationships and stuff like that, but you've kind of leaned a little bit into science fiction and stuff like that. I was just wondering, like, if this has been something that you've craved and kind of held on to since your younger years.
Indeed, it is. I blame my dad.
Yeah.
It was so so there I was, 5, 6, 7 years old, collecting comic books and enjoying comic books and things like that. My dad didn't want me reading comic books.
What was your favorite comic book?
Oh, it was Fantastic Four.
Okay, yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, I remember that.
Remember that? So I was collecting comic books, and my dad said, How am I gonna get him away from comic books? So he brought home an Edgar Rice Burroughs Tarzan story. And he had me read Tarzan. Oh, Tarzan was very interesting. Well, then he gave me another story that was, John Carter of Mars, Barsoom, and now that one's more science fiction. And
They made a movie about that one too.
oh, they did.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, yeah,
It was
pretty good.
flopped, but I liked it
It
actually.
was pretty. I kind of liked it too. Kind of like breadcrumbs in the forest where where you lead leave out of the forest. He started feeding me these adventure books, and then some of them were pulp science fiction books like Doc Smith's, the Lensman series, from the 30s and 40s that my dad had read when he was younger, and I just got hooked on science fiction that way. So, yeah, it was an attempt to wean me away from comic books, and it worked.
Did you ever watch like Lost in Space and stuff like that?
I loved Lost in Space.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know who I had on the show here is Marta Kristen, who played the young girl on that show. She was on my podcast a couple of months ago, and she was living in one of those trailer home areas on the Pacific Palisades, and she actually lost her home. And I've been trying to get in touch with her, and her phone is not working, and she hasn't written me by email. But I hope she's fine. But like, I had a few people who lost their homes in the whole fire, but she was one of them. And
Oh,
yeah, she was great. She came in and talked all about the old days and her whole career and
oh
stuff.
my
That was beautiful.
I've seen some of your podcasts. I'm gonna have to look that one up too.
I'll send it to you. Yeah, yeah.
Marta. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, the robot.
Yeah.
Danger, Will Robbins. Danger.
And did you ever get into like Star Trek and stuff like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Several of my friends are committed Trekkies,
Mhm.
and um, I actually I enjoyed Star Trek. I thought especially the early Star Trek. Um,
Captain Kirk, the Canadian.
there we go, and to boldly go where no man has gone before. Let's update that to boldly go where no one has gone before.
Yeah.
But it was such a hopeful vision of the future that I did appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there was a story about um what is the name of the guy who started the Star Trek?
I'm not sure. I don't know who did that.
I'm forgetting his, I do know his name.
Someone will write in the comments when this
Yes.
comes out.
Someone will. Shame on me.
I don't know who created Star Trek. I don't know.
Big bird of the galaxy. Just fading on his name now. Apologize, everyone.
Yeah.
But the story is that he had been a scriptwriter trying to break into Hollywood while he was doing his job, which was he was a Los Angeles police officer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he had and he had a script, that he wanted to have somebody look at. So he waited until, an executive, a Fox executive or something, had pulled out of Fox, and he pulled him over at a traffic stop, and and basically shoved the shoved the script into his hand and says, "You need to read this." Apparently it worked because he started getting work in Hollywood as a scriptwriter.
And next week, 1,000 writers join the police force in Hollywood.
Yes. Hey,
Yeah.
it's a way to get there. It's a
That's amazing. That's a great story.
I know.
Yeah. So, is there anything we haven't touched on that you wanted to kind of bring up? Is there any pet project or something that you wanted to discuss? I mean, it's been great. I mean,
I
we've already been in this for a while here.
Wow, I've enjoyed. No, I enjoy this very much. I certainly have stories to tell, and you. Um, no, I think we've covered a whole bunch of things. But yeah, when you see a firefighter or a paramedic, realize that they've gone through a lot of training,
Hmm.
and they're they really are out there to try to do the best for everyone. So
I like the firefighter kind of mentality. Like I think like there's no there's no real decision making. Like you show up when bad shit happens and you have to save people. Like it's not like you're preemptively stopping this person from doing maybe something or maybe not. Like there's no questions in it. Like when the fire people, when the firefighters show up, it's because bad shit's going on and they're there to save you, right? Like I love that simplicity of it. Like there's no
it is.
politics, there's no garbage, there's no they were wrong, this is wrong, they shouldn't have done this. They just show up when the bad stuff happens and you just listen to them because they're trying to save the day, right?
Trying to
I just love how simple the mentality is around just saving people. I'm totally enthralled by that because it seems like every other job in the world, people are double asking questions about motivation, motive, corruption, all this chaos that exists in our world. But it seems like firefighters, it's that job and the way the public interprets that work is just so respectful and clean of all the garbage that exists in our society.
And I do thank people for supporting us, and when they say nice things, when they tell me about someone that in their family that has been rescued, or we attempted to rescue some first responder, helped to rescue them. They're very very heartwarming,
Hmm.
heartfelt thanks and things like that. Oh, I do have one story to tell you that
Okay.
combines
Yeah.
having been a paramedic and the world of science fiction.
Okay. I just thought it'd be good.
Yeah. So I started attending science fiction conventions at some point. I'd been a paramedic for a number of years, and I had friends that were in the industry writing science fiction, things like that.
Mhm.
But I'd never met Larry Niven. Larry Niven's a very, very well known science fiction author. Um, I got a chance to meet him at a local science fiction convention. A friend of mine took me over to meet him, introduced me. Larry Niven is a very smart man,
Mhm.
and he asked me, "So, what do you do for a living?" And my quirky sense of humor kicked in at that moment, and I said, "Oh,
Unemployed actor.
no," I said, "Oh, I break into people's houses for a living." And he looked at me and he thought about it. He said, "Do they usually thank you for it?" And I go, "Yeah." He says, "Well, what do you really do?" He says, "I'm a paramedic, and I assist people." He says, "Yeah, right." So yes, part of my skill set was I break into people's houses for a living,
Mhm.
and they usually thank me for it afterwards.
And I write books as well.
Yes, I do.
What did Larry Nevin write? I'm not familiar with his work.
Larry Niven was a hard science fiction author. He's still alive.
Mm.
He's quite elderly now. Um, he wrote a lot of books in the in the known. His was called the Known Earth Saga. He wrote World of the Tavs. He wrote books. He would write a lot of stories and a lot of books that were out in space. So it was very hard science fiction.
Mhm.
Yeah, Niven, Niven, Larry Niven.
Okay.
You'd probably enjoy some of this stuff.
I actually love that stuff. Like one of my favorite movies that I've seen in the last couple of years was with Brad Pitt and Tommy Lee Jones. It was called Ad Astra, where Brad Pitt's an astronaut and his father is like the most respected astronaut ever, but he gets lost in this mission really far away, but they don't know if he's still alive, and he's like beaming what flashes of I don't know what they called it, but it was affecting all the radio towers, and it was affecting all the communication technology on Earth. So they sent Brad Pitt out to go and make sure his dad was still alive, or to get him to stop sending out these like electric pulses at Earth. And it was absolutely beautiful film, and I really loved it. Like that kind of science fiction where you can have this, relationship, like this broken relationship between a son and a father too. Like it quite worked for me. I really liked it. I don't really like the Marvel-y science fiction world. I feel like it's too comic book, even though I grew up loving comic books also. But I really liked Ad Astra. I thought that was a great one. Yeah.
I did. I liked it too.
Mm. I mean, did you like the 2001 Space Odyssey and all that kind of stuff?
Oh yes, Stanley Kubrick. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah, yes. And of course, the HAL 9000 in 2001. So the first computer that goes off on its own.
Yeah. I would love to see a film of your science fiction movie where the aliens come and kind of semi-conquer you and then kind of keep you around for a while longer before they fully exterminate you, and having that little window of like, hey, we're all friends for a moment. That would be just fantastic.
I hope it gets made someday.
You could make it as like a comedy or a satire, or you could make it
Yes.
as a hardcore science fiction movie. Like if Seth MacFarlane wanted to do it, like that would be hilarious too.
Yes. He's quite a Star Trek fan, I'm told.
I've heard
Yes.
that too. Yeah, he
Yes.
loves that stuff. But yeah, he's just a genius. Yeah. Well, this is exciting. You're writing, and you're keeping it going, and you got all this creativity flowing out of you. It's amazing.
I'm having lots of fun.
Much deserved. Yeah.
Living in LA, I'm having lots of fun too.
After being an insomniac for 33 years.
Yes. Yes. Oh, this has been great.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank
Ryan.
you. Thank you. And look, anytime something comes out or you got a new book coming out, you just want to talk about it, yeah, just come by anytime.
I will do that. I will do that. And if you want to produce that movie, we'll talk. Your people will talk to my people.
That's how it works, I think. That's perfect. But now we can just go up here so people can see we're in the same room. And it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for swinging by.
It has been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Come back anytime. It's great.
Enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're out. And that's it. Just
Okay.